The challenge, the opportunity to connect. The 1960s, a time of imagination and change, a time of anger and fear. The 1960s, a program called Challenge.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Looked at our connections, our divisions, through the lens of faith. Nearly 60 years later, during these challenging times, we'll take a new look at our divisions, our connections, in a new program called Challenge 2.0. In last week's edition of Challenge 2.0, we examined the need for great care in crafting our exits from the coronavirus lockdown. How it will be a continual process, demanding close attention to our physical health, but also to our emotional and spiritual health. That will vary for each of us, and that task then is what we continue in our conversation on this edition of Challenge 2.0. And so we are very fortunate to have three exceptional faith leaders this week who have agreed to share their wisdom, their perceptions, and get deeper into this question of how do we constructively exit lockdown. So I would like to introduce each of them at this time. Anil Afzali, who's the Executive Director of the American Muslim Empowerment Network, part of Muslim Association of Puget Sound, are located there in Redmond. So Anila, delighted to have you join us again this week.
Great
we have Rabbi Johanna Kinberg from Congregation Kol Ami, and I believe that's in Kirkland.
Yes.
And then Reverend Dr. Kelly Brown of Plymouth Church in Seattle. And each of you are members in the larger sense of what is called Daughters of Abraham. So I thank each of you, and I'm very grateful to each of you for agreeing to join us for this program.
Thank you for having us.
Before we get into the bigger questions, I would just be remiss if I didn't ask, how are each of you doing? How are each of your families doing?
I'll say that for me, it's an honor to be here, especially with my two dear sisters. For me, it's the middle of fasting month, Ramadan. So it has been a spiritual upliftment. I was excited for this month to show up. I'm so glad it's here. It has really helped address some of the lower spiritual feelings that I had before Ramadan started, in part because of the pandemic. So I myself am good. My family's good. Even though we are separated, we're all in our separate homes and we can't have our usual gatherings for Ramadan, for breaking of the fast. All of that is prohibited to us right now. But at the same time, I am reminded of my blessings and how privileged I feel to have a safe home to stay in, food for me to eat, water, and anything I need. I feel very, very blessed and fortunate. So I'm doing well. I hope you all are as well.
Johanna and Kelly, how are you doing?
Both Kelly and I have Huskies home, and so I have a son who went off to the University of Washington. We live in Olympia in the fall, and now he's back, and he is took over the basement and created his own space. And it's been interesting to we transitioned a young adult out of the house, and now we have transitioned him back into our family. Who's just a little brother who's 13. And we are, I feel like often like we're four peas in a pod. We're just in this, in this pod of safety. Thank God we have enough of everything that we need. And, that's very, very comforting to feel that we have enough, and as a family, and we can also help others. That's the blessing, is the sort of also the overflow of abundance. It feels like sometimes, in our lives. I am, like my sisters, so grateful to have a home, to have the resources we need, to have a church that made the commitment to continue to pay its staff for the as long as this pandemic goes on. And so I am extremely privileged and grateful. I'm also just want to share the honesty of being a faith leader, as I'm sure my sisters can also say. It has been a walk of despair to manage the many folks who've reached out in tears, to pray with folks who a woman who I haven't spoken with in months called me last night as I was in the car, and it's just so deeply impacted with the
amount of people who are dying around her that she's aware of. And there was a family where in my church that had the COVID-19 disease, and thankfully they have recovered, but it was very, very difficult and a sad time. And so while I am very blessed and very grateful that my daughter's making masks so I could be fashionable when I go out to the grocery store and to the pharmacy, and we're doing our best to disinfect and to, take care of ourselves, my heart is also continuously broken. And as an empath, it's been a difficult time to sleep. I haven't been able to go to sleep before 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning.
A quote that really stopped me and gave me pause was one I believe that was attributed to a rabbi in Brooklyn who observed that this pandemic and the sacrifices demanded have offered, as he put it, the opportunity for a Passover beyond the exile of consciousness. And I was really struck by that. Do you agree? And do you think that this suggests that a return to normal, as we define it from pre-pandemic life, isn't really that desirable? And whoever would like to tackle that first.
For me, certainly a return to normal is not desirable. I think this has been a chance for us to be honest about where we are and who we are and how we have participated in society and in the world. And I think for me, one of the things that is so important to my sense of faith is watching how Mother Earth is healing herself during this time. I am so encouraged that, one of the largest holes in the ozone is almost completely healed, that the canals in Venice are sparkling clear with swans returning and dolphins. I'm watching how there's healing all across the land because, people are able to see their skies in LA and in China. So for me, I believe that the universe is showing us and this world is showing us that this can be a time to heal the things that we thought we needed, the ways that we thought and ideals that we believed were necessary for our way of living. We've seen that the meetings that we knew could be emails truly can. We've seen that the ways that we are together truly can be done in different ways, and that we can honor all people differently. And so for me, my hope is that what he said is true, that we honor that this is an opportunity, a springboard for a new way of being together.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Reverend Kelly about that. As I said in the prior session that we did, normal was not okay for so many people. And for us to think about just going back to normal would really miss out on what I believe this pandemic has given us, the gift of really seeing things with clearer eyes, seeing the injustices in the system, seeing the inequities, and really giving us an opportunity. This is almost like a pause so that we can reassess ourselves and hopefully make some very different choices that address some of the inequities rather than allowing those inequities to exacerbate and get worse. And I think faith communities and faith leaders in particular have a critical role in helping ensure that we come out of this pandemic with clearer eyes morally around some of these issues. Like Reverend Kelly, I'll also say that there's a lot that we could be doing online, and I hope that part continues beyond this pandemic, especially when there are access issues that so many people face. I know so many community members who are differently abled have previously asked for certain access ways, that we now are creating or realizing they work, instead of when people who are most vulnerable were asking for it, or people who are sort of people who are mothers or fathers and have children at home, for them also to make sure that there are these ways that we can do our work online. I hope that part continues, but I don't want to just go back to the way things were. I want us to reassess. I want us to make a difference in how we move forward on so many different issues. And I want faith communities who are now stepping up and responding to COVID-19 through relief and humanitarian work. I want us to do more of that and also figure out how we can address the underlying issues, so we're not just dealing with the symptoms of people who are in food insecure, people who face housing shortages or are housing insecure. We can actually help change the system so that all of us have some, and we can come out lifting up each other rather than allowing this increasing gap between the haves and the have-nots. So I don't want to return to normal, but there is a desire to return to being able to reconnect with people and redo some of the work that we've done in person, hopefully in better ways that allows for more connection and also, importantly, allows us to be grateful. You know, I think we took a lot for granted, including our places of worship. So one of the big lessons for me that I want to take out of this is being so grateful for what we have and not taking it for granted.
Hannah, what are your perspectives on that?
Well, when I think about sort of the Passover, there's a lot of, passing over the houses. There's death is that.
Yeah.
The angel of death was was the last of the plagues that led to the liberation of the people. And so there, we are, especially as Americans, because we're losing so many people, walking through this valley of a shadow of death. And that is a transformative experience, to walk through that together. I think about all the people who are dying alone and how so many people are praying for them and not allowing their spirits to be unaccompanied at all. I see that in my community. I know it's happening in your communities too, because we are having to mourn differently. And so through this pain, there's also there's a great transformation, because we're torn apart by this. We're in shambles, especially as Americans. I think and so that as we will rebuild, hopefully better, and that we will come together. I think that, it's the time for daughters of Abraham, women from all the descendants of Abraham, to become greater leaders in our world as we rebuild and reconstruct. And, we're right now in our cycle in the Jewish calendar, we're just past Holocaust Memorial Day, which became a part of our formal religious calendar, less than 100 years ago. And so between the last pandemic in 1918 and this pandemic, the Jewish people have been through a lot, and seen sort of a mass death, and how to recover from, just that experience of mourning on this massive level, and how do you rebuild yourself from that. And that's also a type of resurrection. So I am, with Kelly, I also agree that the resurrection will happen when there will be a spiritual resurrection. And I think that we're all, in many of our communities, we have a lot of people praying for that, and that will make a difference on the other side.
Both in terms of what you offer online, if you will, remotely via virtual platforms such as we're speaking on right now, and directly, you're going to be encountering a lot of people who are wounded in one sense or another, from having lost somebody economically, from having lost a job, or just wondering where they're going through. How do you anticipate you're responding to that? And as we're talking to other people out in our audience that might be coming in contact with people with those needs, with those wounds, how would you recommend they respond to those?
For Plymouth Church, we are fortunate to have a pastoral care team. And we had a little bit of time to consider how we might go forward. So the sort of fallout from the fear of this COVID-19 disease and the coronavirus was instant, because, of course, with the lack of really knowledge about the features of this disease and the way it's shared and all of that. So we instantly saw that there was going to be a need. And what we're doing now is really trying to offer so many opportunities for people to reach out. There are particular people who have shared with us that they don't do well with isolation. They don't do well with staying home or by themselves. And so we've created circles of love and compassion that are calling some folks even more than once a day, just to touch in and to make sure that there is a presence and some connection with one another. And we are in relationship with many organizations, and we're trying to consider now in the long term, should we create a counseling center? What should we do to have sort of systems in place so that when this is over, we can deal not even effectively, but just with as much compassion as we can for the many people who are impacted on different levels with this time. So I have been available along with the pastoral team. We are blessed to have 4 clergy people who have been doing a lion's share of work to be in connection with the many folks who have already begun. We have people who have family in New York, that they're scared to death of how they will be impacted. We have people, who have been impacted themselves. We had an old elderly couple where they moved into an elder care facility and immediately contracted the COVID-19 or the coronavirus. And unfortunately, one of them passed away. And so we know the depths of the sorrow that we will walk together. And we have already anticipated how we can have systems. And also for me as the preacher and the faith leader among other ministers and clergy at our church, I've truly sought to be honest, to not gloss over that we will be different on the other side of this. I haven't tried to say this is a yellow brick road when it truly is a valley with a shadow of death. I have honestly said that all of us may not be able to come back together. And I think by being honest that we will get through it, but we won't be the same.
Mhm.
That is the kind of honesty that we need to see when we turn on CNN, when we turn on, our other media outlets. And I have tried to be that kind of voice for our own community, because it serves none of us to be dishonest that this is going to be the hardest thing that many of us go through in our lifetimes.
And Neela, what about your community?
Yeah, for MAPS, as well as different mosques around town, also have had their imams or religious scholars available for sort of, counseling services or some kind of pastoral care as well. In that sense, I know our imam at MAPS, Sheikh Adam Jamal, has spoken to people who've been impacted directly by COVID-19, and that is, there to provide some kind of comfort to them. I know many people have lost family members, so being able to provide some kind of support there. At MAPS, also through our MCRC program, we've done a check-in with vulnerable people in the community, specifically the elderly. We have a program for seniors throughout the year. So our MCRC program has reached out to all of those people in that program to check in on them, see how they're doing, provide not just sort of physical assistance in terms of food or grocery delivery or medical equipment that they might need, but also provide some kind of moral, emotional support during this time. We've also helped support other individuals. I remember this one single woman who reached out to us because she was in self-isolation because she had COVID-19 symptoms. And she lives alone here. She had said that she doesn't have any family or other community members. And fortunately, she did reach out to us. And we had somebody from, again, our MCRC program, one of those volunteers reached out to her every single day. And just being there, just having somebody to talk to and connect to and know that there's people watching out for you, that you're not alone. She described how her anxiety really decreased knowing that she has some kind of support system behind her. So I do think faith communities play a critical role in providing that kind of support. I will also add that for me personally, I've started this program for Ramadan that I started mostly for the benefit of my own immediate family members, but I've opened it up to others as well. And it's essentially reading this one book that is about spiritual upliftment, specifically purification of the heart. The book is called Reclaim Your Heart, and the program is called Recharge This Ramadan. And we do readings, just 15-minute readings, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday evenings. And then on Saturday, we have an opportunity to discuss what we read. And I've already had people who've participated in that program with me tell me already that they have felt their heart sort of lighten in some ways, that this has been sort of an antidote to a lot of the heaviness that they were feeling, to a lot of the despair or just general down, just feeling down that a lot of people have been experiencing. So finding these kinds of ways for people to connect and really get a boost spiritually, emotionally, and morally, I think is a critical part of what faith communities can and are doing right now.
Do you think there could be a bonus benefit in terms of faith observances being online, where people outside of your faith tradition really didn't have any sense of what you did, what you believe, that maybe through the access online, whether this is going on to YouTube or whatever, do you think there might be a benefit there?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that for MAPS, we've had some of our services already be live streamed on Facebook, but we put many more services online now. And we found unique ways with some of the specific educational classes, for instance, or some of the other, like some of these, the smaller gatherings, what we call sort of study sessions, to have them online allows more people to participate, and also people sort of outside to get a real clear view of, hey, what is this religion talking about? What do Muslims think when they get together? What are they discussing? What's important? And we've had many non-Muslims listen in to some of our sermons and be like, hey, I find that in my text as well. I find that in my faith tradition as well. The same kinds of teachings about hope, about optimism, about strength, about forgiveness, about speaking well, all of these teachings that sort of cross various faith traditions. I think we can see some of similarities. And then for me, it's always beautiful to see the way that different people worship. So I enjoy learning from my Jewish sisters and brothers, from my Christian sisters and brothers and their services. And it's always, for me, I personally enjoy participating, and having online access makes it a lot easier to do so.
Johanna, and then Kelly, if you could offer perhaps your perspective, do you think that might be one of the benefits that would grow out of this experience?
Well, I think something that we share in common is that we were all going through this, and so were all of our co-religionists at the same time, which is how do we continue to meet the needs of our community and build intimacy through something that's very difficult, that's affecting us all, using the technologies we have at hand. And so we all went through that at the same time. We haven't really even had enough of a chance to really step back as religious groups and reflect on that. But when we first started doing these services online at the end of February, we haven't met in months together. We're in Kirkland, so we shut things down pretty early. We were about a mile away from the Life Care Center, so we shut things down pretty early. At first, we were doing the services in the building, and we were sort of trying to replicate what we would do on our Friday night and Saturday morning services from our bema with the altar. But then we couldn't do that anymore. The whole building was shut down. And so now we're leading from our homes. And we had all these different challenges of how do we do that, and how do we incorporate the music. And when you're forced to be creative and deconstruct what you do, it's opportunity sometimes to rethink about what the values are. And so in building our services, we've tried to make it so that we build the most community and intimacy through this platform. Now, we are a much smaller community. We're 135 families. And so we're talking about maybe 10 or 20 people at a service, but that actually, you can have a lot of interaction and people can do readings and sharing. And so, yes, it's forced us to be creative, and that's broken some things open for us and allowed us to assess, we're still going to be doing the same prayers, but how do we do it in a way that, builds community, given the state of our world today?
And Kelly, what's your perspective on that?
I absolutely agree with my sisters. And I also want to say that I have never been more clear that we are ambassadors for our faith expressions. And this is an opportunity for us to share who we are with knowing that our audience has enlarged.
Mhm.
So what I mean by that is, especially during this pandemic, there's something in me that believes, because of the level of anxiety and fear that, the wicked would cease from troubling. But Islamophobia and anti-Semitism is rearing its head even during this pandemic. And so for me, my hope is that there will be people who will, log on to see Rabbi Yohana. There will be people who log on to Maps and their hearts might be changed and inspired, and will discover the connections that we do indeed have during this time. I am very clear, and so every time I am sharing, I am sharing certainly for our own community, and I'm able to call out, the names of those who I know are isolated and alone, and call out the names of the many people who are doing acts of kindness and compassion. But I'm also speaking to the invisible community that we're gathering, that is clear that the only Christianity are the ones who would gather on the steps of a state house. The only Christianity are the folks who would stand over and against the most vulnerable, or assume that, certain ones of us, like our Puerto Rican siblings, shouldn't get a check from the federal government. So I am very clear that this is an opportunity for us to break down walls and to really share that there are expressions of the Christian faith, and certainly whatever our faith expression is, so that we might touch hearts or prick hearts towards transformation and change. And that is one thing I am certain that we won't let go of as we go further on in our ministry, that we are building a community that is so much like what Martin Luther King Jr. Imagined, a beloved community where there are truly opportunities for transformation based on what they are experiencing in our own expressions. I'm grateful.
You've modeled some wonderful responses that are going on now, and some wonderful opportunities for each of us as we go forward from this. So I would thank you, each of you. I hope you'll come back and join us again. And I would hope that each of you individually are well, your faith communities are well. And to all of you watching this episode of Challenge 2.0, I hope that you have the gift of health and will remain healthy and be well in the trying months ahead. Thanks for joining us, and we'll hope that you tune in again next week.